Have a short introduction and a speech. Mr. Kentra.
Thank you, Azra. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to our annual DFC 365 conference. And before starting officially, we agreed that today our working language will be English, but also you will be able to use the simultaneous translation. So please, if somebody doesn't have the earphones, it's over there on that side of the table. Just use it, and you'll be able to follow in a local language as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear excellencies, dear friends, welcome to the third DFC 365 conference that sums up the results from our last year's work. I remember when we came up with the idea to establish the DFC in 2015, or to found a center that would be used to fight foreign malign influence, disinformation, and the fake news. Only a few understood what we were talking about back then. Remember that they were very first time fake news phrase was used when President Trump attacked the CNN, for spreading the fake news. Anyhow, we gathered a team of a young, talented, intelligent young people who think for themselves and first of all believe in what they do in order to fight this phenomenon. With a constant education and trainings that they had before the DFC itself has been opened, and with the valuable help from experienced people, as well as our partners, primarily from the US. And when I say US, I mean State Department, USAID, Balkan Trust for Democracy, and of course the Embassy of the United States here in Montenegro, then NATO, UK, Germany, but also our friends and neighbors from Croatia. Today I can say that I am very proud of all of them and everything that we did in the previous period. Let's remember only one of the first operations when we exposed GRU agents in one of the respective NATO countries, the case of so-called Yellow Vests in Paris, when we managed to identify a number of the GRU agents that were subversively acting on the French territory and whose branches were in Serbia itself. Also, we managed to clearly identify Russian interference through Serbia and the Serbian Orthodox Church in 2020 processions, and pointed out the interference of the foreign actors in the elections in many Western countries. Unfortunately, Montenegro was not the exception. So the presence of the foreign intelligence services on the territory of our country has been particularly prominent during the last 2 years. Here I'm talking about covert operations that were led or are still being led without the knowledge of or permission of our country. In fact, since Montenegro's accession to NATO, Moscow, backed by local actors, and when I say local actors, I mean political actors, media, NGOs, etc., has only been amplifying divisions among the citizens and spreading its influence in Montenegro, while promoting itself as a protector of the Serbs and Orthodoxy and weakening the pillars of Montenegrin statehood and identity, using propaganda, historical revisionism, and everyday launching of disinformation and creating the narratives that aim to discredit NATO and the West. These issues need to be terminated as soon as possible. We must not allow for particular media, NGOs, political parties, or individuals to be used for undermining our democratic system. Let's just for a moment take a look at the current situation in our country. Let's take a look at the depth of these divisions among citizens, how close we are to what we had successfully escaped in the worst period of the 90s. We deal with the church issues and the topics that should have remained part of the 18th century. New identity issues have been raised daily, including the new divisions. And then we need to ask ourselves, who is the only one benefiting from the situation? NATO and the Western countries do not for sure. NATO wants a stable Montenegro and a democratically strengthening Montenegro with a fully developed rule of law. On the other hand, there is only one country that benefits from the chaos in Montenegro. The country that during the 2016 coup attempt learned the hard way that these issues couldn't be resolved that way here. Since that day, therefore, it plays a more perfidious and slyer game, more cleverly than ever before, protecting its people, keeping them away from unnecessary risk. Finally, there is no need to do it since it disposes a number of those who are ready to do everything for the sake of Mother Russia, who really believe in what they are doing and who won't stop unless the Kremlin orders termination of activities. As a key Russian partner in the Balkans, Serbia enables the Russian influence to be spread across the region. In the political and security synergy of these two countries, a construct of the so-called Serbian world has been created, which represents nothing but the well-known concept of the Russian world. After the 2020 parliamentary elections and after clear promoters of the Russian interests in Montenegro entering the government, this concept has been presented by many high political and the church addresses, not only in Montenegro, but also in Republic of Srpska and Serbia. This concept succeeded in dividing the Montenegrin society in a very short period of time and triggering a range of negative events that have already had an impact on the dynamic of Montenegro's EU membership with the very severe security implications. On the other hand, when we talk about Moscow's influence through the Serbian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church, and its support to the political parties close to the church, then we need to understand that it surpasses the soft power concept and may have devastating consequences, which may be best illustrated by the example of the Russian Orthodox Church support to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And to conclude, if we want to eradicate the malign influence of Russia and Serbia from the Western Balkan region, understanding, support, and the help of our Western partners and allies are necessary, maybe now more than ever. New energy and awareness are necessary for Russia's current success in destabilizing the internal situation in Montenegro, soon to become an episode that is a vulnerable phase of the democratic development of the Montenegrin society rich in diversity. Otherwise, Moscow could generate the greatest success in the Western Balkans right in Montenegro, NATO member and the most serious EU candidate. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and now I would like to give the floor to the friend of Montenegro, first of all, Ambassador of the US to Montenegro, Judy Rising Rank. Please.
Thank you, Sava. Thank you, friends. Dobar dan. It's a pleasure to be here on this third anniversary of the Digital Forensics Center project I'm very proud to support. I want to commend you, Sava. I want to commend the leadership and the members of the Digital Forensic Center for the work you tirelessly do to promote Western values, to advance Montenegro along its Euro-Atlantic path. The work of the DFC, and many of you know it, I hope you know it, over the last 3 years is to identify disinformation, as Savo just said, and to educate the public. And this has been so valuable for this country, and I appreciate the work you do. Today, I'm looking forward to learning about the research that DFC has done into Russia's role in the Balkans, and let's say Russia's role and presence in Montenegro. But at the same time, I can imagine there are not as many surprises for those of us who closely follow the destabilizing role that Russia has played in countries around the world, including in my own. I will say that the Biden administration is fully committed to holding Russia accountable for its reckless actions. For instance, last month, the United States, in concert with the United Kingdom, imposed additional costs on the Russian Federation on the one-year anniversary of the poisoning of Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny, who was poisoned with a Novichok nerve agent. That's a chemical weapon. We condemn the August 2020 assassination attempt on Mr. Navalny and subsequent actions intended to stop his efforts to criticize the Russian government. Freedom of speech. And that included his imprisonment in January 2021. So the actions of the United States, and these include actions, specific actions by the Departments of State, of Treasury, of Justice, and of Commerce, these send a clear signal that there will be no impunity for the use of chemical weapons, including for the individuals and the organizations involved. Now, I could rattle on a list of Russia's efforts to sow discord and to wreak havoc on a global level, and when possible. And the United States will also seek opportunities to cooperate with Russia with the goal of building a more stable and predictable relationship with the United States and global interests. We have to do this for the security of the world. We value a deep connection that we have with the Russian people, and we will continue to support the protection of human rights and the advancement of democracy in Russia, because the Russian people deserve much better. So, knowing what to expect from the Russian government, based on their past track record, both at home and abroad, it comes as no surprise that Russia would eagerly capitalize upon what I increasingly see as a frayed social fabric in Montenegro. So let me say it plainly. It was evident during recent events surrounding the enthronement of Metropolitan Ioannikia in Cetinje that polarization and divisions are increasing in Montenegro, and this makes me deeply worried about the Euro-Atlantic future of the country. The scenes of anger, of fear, of division, those things that I saw last week shook me deeply. I couldn't believe that this country had reached such a dangerous point, and I fear that Russia, with its political and religious proxies from the region and inside the country, have found fertile ground in a deeply divided Montenegro. And that helps its efforts to reverse this country's Western trajectory and to derail it from its Euro-Atlantic future. And my friends, we cannot let this happen. We must look to the government of Prime Minister Krivokapic, his partners, the parliamentary speaker Becic and the Deputy Prime Minister Abazovic, and others within the government to deliver on the promises they made a year ago to keep Montenegro on a Euro-Atlantic course, to maintain those key elements of Montenegro's foreign policy that matter, and to prioritize reforms in order to speed EU accession. Those were promises that need to be kept. And at the same time, I urge President Đukanović, DPS, and other opposition figures to put the politics of division aside and work in the public interests. So my message is to both, to the government and to the opposition. I want to point out that a Euro-Atlantic future is one of the points that you have all chosen as a right way forward for Montenegro, a point of agreement Focus now on finding those areas where you can make progress on this shared goal. Avoid those issues that would cause long-term polarization, that would inflame tensions, and that would provide fertile ground for malign influences. This is the area of your shared future. Recent events should serve as a wake-up call to all those in Montenegro who simply want peace and prosperity. Everyone knows that EU membership will bring a brighter, more secure future for your country. So stand up and voice your opinions. Demand that your political leaders seek common ground and constructive solutions rather than descending into divisive rhetoric. Recent events have vividly shown the dangers of disinformation, of semi-truths, and unverified information. We saw once again the importance of a professional and ethical media and strong media literacy skills for a resilient democracy. And so, while Russia-backed disinformation will undoubtedly continue to swirl in Montenegro, it will only be successful so far as society is weak and divided. That's why the U.S. Embassy will continue to support programs designed to strengthen civil society, to professionalize the media, to improve media literacy skills in order to combat corruption, to strengthen institutions, and build resiliency against foreign malign influence, including disinformation. Moreover, all of our projects, and I assure you every one of our projects, is going to support and continues to support diversity and inclusion. So, we continue to support simple programs like English language learning, education exchanges. We work on very basic things and important things like strengthening our economic ties. We're not giving this away. We're working with the Montenegrin people. In fact, later today, I'll participate in the launch of the very first U.S.-Montenegrin economic dialogue. Not a gift, but a platform to deepen the engagement. This is where the focus needs to be, on the economy, on education, on providing opportunities, on getting the pandemic under control, not on politics, not on divisive issues like the census being cynically championed by those who hope they'll be able to further divide the population, let's say between us and them, whoever that is. Their gain is this country's loss. The United States stands ready to support the establishment of a constructive dialogue that would include both political actors and civil society representatives to help form a consensus that would advance Montenegro along its western path. But the international community cannot want a Western future for Montenegro more than it does for itself. The long-term success of this country, and I'm looking at many of you, is dependent on the people of Montenegro. The United States will stand by you. We're your friend, we're your partner, and let me assure you, we're your ally. But the hard work of reconciliation, of making progress towards a Euro-Atlantic future path, must be done by the citizens of Montenegro, with the full knowledge of those who would wish you ill, both within and without, and who would seek to thwart the efforts, including through disinformation. That's going to be there. So is political will and public will stronger? I would hope so. And now is the time. Building on Montenegro's proud tradition of inter-ethnic harmony, that's a key. Those who seek a bright future for the government, for the country, must redouble their efforts to shape a democratic and inclusive Montenegro that is deeply rooted in Western institutions. It's a bold vision, it's a brave vision, it's a beautiful vision, and I hope it's your vision. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So I mentioned at the beginning, that DFC is actually a combination of the bright, talented young people, and today two of them will present you, what we have done in the past, and our chief analyst Milan will present you exclusively today, our new study on a Russian influence in the region, but with a case study of Montenegro in particular. So I would like to invite two of them, Milan and Marko, to join us and to deliver their presentations. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. I would like to thank you for coming today on behalf of our team in the DFC. So today I will present you the annual work from the DFC, and I have to tell you it was a very busy year. We had a very dynamic socio-political situation in the country and in the region, and that reflected on our work. So before that, I will also give you just a brief what is our mission in DFC. Our director already told you a little bit about it. So our main mission is fighting against foreign malign influence and the tools for that malign influence, disinformation and fake news. But it is also our main mission to increase media and digital literacy. Also, it is very important for promoting critical thinking. We cannot debunk every disinformation, so it is very important for our society to have enough high level of media literacy. And now I'll present you a little bit of our work, which you can find in DFC annual publication. So this is a third year of DFC, and we continue to monitor all media in our nation and in the region. So this year we analyzed over 50,000 articles in regional and Montenegrin media, and unfortunately 35% of them contain some sort of information manipulation. These manipulations are mainly used for malign foreign influence, and these campaigns are very organized. Unfortunately, they are coming mostly from Serbia, and this has been the situation for the past 2 or 3 years. And this year we have brutal campaigns during the constitution of new government, during the elections in Nikšić, during the elections in Herceg-Novi, also during the adoption of genocide resolution in our parliament, and most recently, as you've probably seen, on the events on Cetin. So, because we are aware of the behavior of Serbian media, we continue to monitor the same project as we did last year, 6 online portals, Alo, Blitz, Espresso, Informer, Kurir, and Serbia Danas, to monitor their behavior and what are they writing about Montenegro. So this year there was nearly 16,000 articles with the keyword of Montenegro, and over 9,000 of them directly targeting Montenegro. Just above 4,000 of them were relevant articles. What that means is this means that those articles were directly undermining democratic values and democratic processes in Montenegro. Now, here are some of the narratives we established during our monitoring. So the key narrative, which was the same the last year, was that Montenegro is the captured and a criminal state. So you see it's by far the narrative with the most articles. The second one is where these media are attacking the new leaders of our country, Prime Minister Krivokapić, Deputy Prime Minister Abazović, and President of the Parliament, Bečić. However, it is interesting to point out that Serbian media are a bit lenient towards the Deputy Prime Minister Abazović. We don't know exactly why, because the values of his political party are quite different from the values that are promoted in these articles. So the third one is the usual one, that the Serbs are endangered in Montenegro, and this is narrative which is the core of the concept of Serbian world. And as you can see, there's plenty of rest, which are all based on manipulation and disinformation and fake news. Now, this is something we're very proud of, the DFC magazine that is issued monthly. So in our magazine, we publish different kinds of analysis, researches, broad informations on a variety of topics, hybrid warfare, disinformation, propaganda, social media, in the Western Balkan region and also globally. So also, in our magazine, we had a special focus on media and media literacy. We had plenty interviews with relevant journalists, prominent NGOs leaders from the region and the country. Also, it is important to point out that DFC produced 12 issues that tackled a number of topics that affected the socio-political reality in Montenegro, reaching an average of 18,000 people per issue. Now, this is something new that we launched this year. It's video podcasts and explainers. So we decided to find a different way to attract public and our citizens to listen and learn more about disinformation, propaganda, conspiracy theories, and media literacy. So we decided to give something dynamic, something constructive, and that was the best way to do it via podcast. So our podcast Under the Loop was very successful. We had great guests, and my colleague Milan was the leader who led the interviews. Also, we created video explainers. There were short animated video explainers which tackled what is disinformation, how it's spread, and why it's spread. So it was our goal to reach the younger audience, which is spending the most time on the social media, and it will be probably the best for them. So here's some stats we achieved during this project, which was named Care Before You Share. So we reached over 90,000 profiles on Facebook and generated more than 5,000 engagements. On Twitter, we have more than 20,000 impressions and nearly 2,000 engagements. As you can see, our highest engagement rate was 10% and average engagement rate 4.1, which is considered highly for the social media platforms. Now, this is something that we continue to do, and we've done this last year. This is a public opinion survey, which is very important for us to follow the trends in our society regarding media usage, trust in media, information quality, fake news, disinformation, and COVID-19, responsibility, and information control. Now, I would like to point out that in this period of pandemic, good journalism, professional journalism was very important, and I think the survey showed that the Montenegrin citizens were very satisfied with how media handled the pandemic. And what is more important, the survey showed that they were aware that information regarding COVID on social media were not reliable enough. I think that was very important, and that is something that saves lives. Now we also continued with our project of education, and we have many workshops and many trainings for journalism, for journalists and for students. Now we held a training for journalists which provided enhanced training and knowledge about digital and cyber space. We also provided tools for research on social media, some tools that we also use. We also had several workshops for students, which had more than 100 participants, and this is very successful campaign, and I think that young people realized how important media literacy is, how important it is to fight against disinformation, and that really encouraged us to continue to do our work. Now, this is probably the most interesting part of our work, apart from doing the weekly analysis that we provide on weekly basis. We also do a monthly in-depth analysis. So this year we did 3 of those. So the first one was in March, was published in March, and it was about local elections in Nikšić. The second one was published in beginning of May, and it was about Serbian world. And the third one, which will be presented today, is about Russian soft power. So the local elections in Nikšić draw a lot of attention to everyone in the country and in the region. This elections was the first one coming after the parliamentary elections, so it was highly tension campaign. And what we noticed is that media in Serbia started a brutal campaign regarding this election. I think the best way to point out how important was this to Serbia is that in the same time Kosovo had parliamentary elections, and media in Serbia basically completely ignored those elections and were clearly focused on elections in Montenegro. We, in this analysis, we carried out analysis that covered the political situation, overview of media coverage on the topic, activities on social media, and Facebook. Now, we all heard about Serbian world, and this is some concept that has been exploited oftenly in recent years. So we decided to give a comprehensive analysis of the concept of Serbian world and the attempt to merge Montenegro in it. We analyzed who are the key actors in Montenegro in region who are arguing for this project, and we also analyzed the role of the Serbian Orthodox Church. I think I want to point out now something that in this analysis, which was published in May, we pointed out that the next key thing for Serbia and its government will be the census in Montenegro. And we've seen this today in recent, although our leaders, Deputy Prime Minister firstly said that the census is not possible to be scheduled for this year. Suddenly, they changed their tune, and now the legislation for the census is already in Parliament, and we've seen that the Monstat director has been fired. So we warned about this 5 months ago, so we need to pay attention to these details. And this is the case study of Russian soft power. I won't do any spoilers. I'll leave this to Milan. And I want to point out in the end the impact of the DFC. So although the media scene in Montenegro is very diverse, and DFC has established itself as a credible source of information, and this is certified by the fact that we've been present in national and regional media more than 470 times. We also established a strong link with our citizens on social media. And here's the stats of our social media, but I have to tell you that after the events on Cetinje, which we closely followed, we had our people, including myself, on the field. These numbers have all doubled. So today, just in first week of September, we have reached more than 1 million profiles on Twitter. The percentage of increase of followers on Twitter is now more than 100%, and the same goes for Facebook and Instagram. Now, this was very brief, and if you have any questions, we'll discuss it after Milan finishes his presentation. And I would like to point out this, that the DFC will continue to be the guardian of the democratic values in Montenegro. Thank you.
Okay, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to say a big thank you for coming here today and being with us on this special occasion. Celebrating third year of the project is no big deal. It's no small thing, actually. So thank you once again. Today I'm not sure if this is working or not, but let's do it this way. Today I'm gonna present something that we have been working on for the last 5 months. And I'm really looking forward just to not just presenting and putting it live, but to seeing your feedback, to seeing your comments, and I really hope after this we can, just engage in productive discussion about the things I'm about to show here. So let's start and jump in with something that I came across a few days ago, and I hope it will work.
Kao i niz manjih vanparlamentarnih srpskih stranaka. U posebnom kategoriju moramo staviti Socijalističku narodnu partiju, iako rukovodstvo ima ponekad ambivalentne stavove prema ključnim a prije svega pokušaju da se zaštiti taj najvitalniji subjekt na koji se buduća politika Rusije može osloniti, to je Srpska pravoslavna crkva.
Well, I think we don't need a presentation after this. We can just stop. So this is a great starter and prologue to what I'm about to show you right now, and maybe in this time, in this 40 minutes that we're in this hall, you maybe had a chance to to read what we have presented in the study. But overall, I just want to say that 30 minutes of my presentation won't do justice to this massive scale of study we have done over 5 months. But I'll just go over some brief things, over some main things, and after that I'll leave it to you if you want to read it in the physical form we have delivered. So, what was the goal? I mean, when we first started and discussing even doing this, we had the goal of exposing the presence of the Kremlin in Montenegro that was exercised through the Moscow soft power implementation in Montenegro, in our country, in our region, since happenings in Crimea in 2014 up to July 2021. The goals, the methods, and people who are doing this together, collaborators, and the effects of the Russian soft power in Montenegro have been analyzed, and we have discussed it. It's Serbia, it's Russian and Serbian Orthodox Church, it's media, it's far-right organizations, far-right activists, far-right parties, politicians, and of course, at the very end, we have dealt with the Russian intelligence services, which we'll find really, really interesting to find out their role in 2016 events in Montenegro and 2017 as well. And the concrete examples we have pointed out in the study not only show that Russia never left Montenegro, but also that they want to change the strategic course of Montenegro from Western to more Eastern one. And how they're going to do it, if my computer listens to me, I might explain. So since 2007, when soft power became, let's say, a subject of discussion in Russia at the really highest level, the concept has made a long journey from decentralized liberal model that we have in, let's say, Joseph Nye definition of soft power to a hybrid integral part of foreign policy and hard power that it is now. In various documents, such as concept of the foreign policy of Russian Federation, it indicates the usage of soft power as complement to traditional diplomacy. At the same time, the document mentions even the usage of soft power to exert pressure and interfere into internal affairs and manipulate public under the pretext of financing cultural and human rights projects. So bear this in mind. This is the leitmotif of the whole study. So, given that the Kremlin incorporated soft power, or their definition of soft power, somewhere you'll find it sharp power. We use the Russian soft power as an integral part of the overall hard power. The meaning has been completely reversed from the original term. Therefore, illegal activities such as bribery, such as espionage abroad, were presented and used as soft power instruments. And I won't go further than Montenegro, which we'll see. And even Vladimir Putin in 2012, when he was preparing for the third presidential mandate, wrote in one of the, when he presented his manifesto for that occasion, he even wrote that the soft power implies a matrix of tools and methods to reach foreign policy goals without the use of arms, but by exerting information and other levers of influence. So this came from the top-level man. And why and how Russia, what does Russia do in the Western Balkans? I would like to say that the Kremlin responded to the sanctions produced by the EU and US in 2014 after the Crimea by infiltrating in many regions, especially in the Western Balkans, sowing discord whenever possible, using the Western Balkans fertile ground. When I say fertile ground, I mean ethnic divisions that are present here, weak and insufficient developed institutions, and of course the controversial media scene. And I have to say that the failure of both the United States and the EU to clearly articulate a coherent and consistent approach to the Western Balkans gave enough space for Russia to come here and do things that we are talking now about. A set of tools from the Russian soft power is large. It includes disinformation, media, social media exploitment, far-right organizations and parties, and of course the church, which we'll discuss later on. So, as many times before, we have said and seen that Russia uses Serbia as a carefully prepared platform for its activities, whose ambivalent foreign position, even though Serbia is EU aspirant country, but on the other hand, Serbia follows foreign policy goals of the Kremlin so far. And there is a possibility that such a significant country, such as Serbia, actually might establish a long-term partnership with Russia, and that way becomes an anti-Western enclave in the Western Balkans. Now, let's discuss a little bit of the political influence. So, the events in Montenegro after the change of the government clearly, in 2020, and the constant attempts to destabilize it are a clear sign that Russia never left Western Balkans, even though Montenegro joined NATO. And the Kremlin presence here, let's say, it became even more evident after a failed coup in 2016, which just showed, deep connections between certain parties in Montenegro, certain activists, and Russia state. But that even stopped Montenegro. That didn't stop Montenegro from joining NATO next year. So we already discussed the Serbian world, and now in the media, since I think March month, I think every day I see someone writing about Serbian world, writing about the concept, the ideas. Everyone has its own concept of the term itself. But the construct of the Serbian world is a copy of the initiative called Ruski Mir, or in translation, Russian world, which was institutionalized on the foundation of the same name. The idea of the Serbian world, that is not new. It is based on the same principles in which a Russian world was built. A concrete example, let's say, on the overlap of the two worlds is the attitude of Russia towards Ukraine and the attitudes of Serbia towards Montenegro. The Russian world denies the right to the existence of the Ukrainian identity and identifies it with the Russian one, the same way Serbia now acts towards Montenegro. And following the soft power of Russia, Serbia is now openly interfering into internal affairs of Montenegro, launching disinformation, fake news, launching it on a very high level and scale like never before. We have followed it since 2017, and this year is something really, really specific. So let's say the most direct exponent of foreign Russian-Serbian activity in the political life is definitely Democratic Front. The activities of this political organization are fully harmonized one way or the other with official positions of Moscow and Belgrade, and in cooperation with them implements various Russian subjects and projects in the region. When I say in the region, I mean in Montenegro per se. The attempted coup on the day of the parliamentary elections just portrayed the depth and the seriousness of this relation between certain, let's say, actors in Montenegro and certain actors in Moscow. And when we discuss, of course, the coup, I won't go into details because it's a very known thing, and I want to present here something that is quite new. In September 2017, in 2018 and 19, the main leaders of DF were all time in Moscow, and they were, giving, having time with high-level people from United Russia or the Putin's party, and were their guests and whatnot on many occasions. Of course, when we discuss, let's leave DF aside, but what about other renowned individuals? We could talk about, let's say, Marko Milačić or Strahinja Bulajić, for instance. The president of Prava Crna Gora, Marko Milačić, is the best, let's say, example of a political convert from one side who was quite true Montenegrin back in 2008 or 9, and from a moment, 2011, 2012, he became an ethnic Serb, an MP who promotes Serbhood, who promotes orthodoxy, and advocates the closest possible cooperation with Russia. And he is a long-term project of Moscow. With his entry into the parliament, it's just phase one of the project is being complete. Of course, the new government of Montenegro, the political engineering of the clergymen of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Montenegro resulted in forming a so-called technocratic government. But this political experiment actually, which is difficult to find in practice of the modern social and any political system, has been exceptionally criticized from the very beginning due to the fact that the closest, let's say, the majority of the ministers and the prime minister himself have been chosen by the choice of the church, Serbian Orthodox Church. And upon taking the office, the new government and the parliamentary majority, the new majority, reacted promptly, and actually their first act was the amendment of the law of the freedom of the religion in a way that is in accordance with the Serbian Orthodox Church. And just like the idea of the Serbian world, the modus operandi of the Serbian church in Montenegro is borrowed, is taken, and it's adjusted to the circumstances in our country. Moscow used Ukrainian Church of the Moscow Patriarchate to deliberately deal in Ukrainian elections in 2018 and local elections in 2019, the same way the Serbian Orthodox Church meddles into the internal affairs of Montenegro and deals with politics. Of course, one method to use soft power is through non-governmental organizations and centers following Russian narrative under the umbrella of promoting tourism, nurturing tradition, and preserving the identity. But there are quite a lot. We have no idea how many until we started researching how many of these NGOs were present in Montenegro. Though many of them are not quite active, but one I would like to mention is Coordination Council of the Organization of Russian Compatriots of Montenegro, where we have two, let's say, quite exposed persons. I won't go too much into details, but I'll just say that they are quite active when it comes to Montenegrin internal politics. They are quite active on Facebook and other social media, Russian social media like VK, where they regularly post photos with high-level officials from Serbia, from foreign intelligence officers to now the leaders of other NGOs and friends of Vladimir Putin. Of course, Nightfalls are there. So there is a lot of names, a lot of organizations that are present in Montenegro, registered in Montenegro, from the perspective of non-governmental organizations, but deal with Russian and spreading Russian influence in our country. But as I mentioned, not a lot of them are active. But it's important to mention. So we come to the state foundations, agencies, and institutes. First of all, we have Rosotrudničestvo, which is a federal agency for the compatriots living abroad that offered, first of all, it was purely, let's say, cultural phenomenon, and then together with Ruski Mir Foundation, or Russian World Foundation, was transformed to a geopolitical tool and phenomena that we have today. It is important today we have 84 cabinets or centers of Ruski Mir, including one in Nikšić in Montenegro at the Faculty of Philology. And it is chaired by Vesna Vukicevic, professor at the university, but before her, Professor Dragan Koprivica, the former spokesman or spokesperson for the party of Milan Knežević, and who was up until a few months ago internal expert in the Ministry of Education, Science, Culture, and Sports. He was the head of the Russian Center of the Ruski Mir in Nikšić in the Faculty of Philology. Of course, we have the Russian Institute for Strategic Studies, which is one of the Kremlin's most important information agencies in charge of non-official creating Russian policy strategies. And they have opened their office in Belgrade, which is, just shows how the Western Balkans region is important in their agenda. So the first head was Leonid Reshetnikov, who was, former intelligence officer, and after that he went to lead the RISI Institute. He was quite active regarding the situation in Montenegro. He met with some of our officials, with head of the church, and I won't go too much into details, but we don't have time. But it is really important to also mention that. Now we come to the paramilitary organizations. Somehow I feel that the Balkan Cossack Army, which was formed in Kotor in 2016, went somehow under the radar of the public. So Cossacks in uniforms and bikers who arrived from Russia, from Bosnia, Republika Srpska, from Ukraine, from Serbia, and of course from Montenegro, gathered in Kotor on September 11th in 2016, together with priests of Serbian Orthodox Church. And it's important to mention that the Balkan Cossack Army is subordinate to the main Cossack Army in Russia, and Cossack Army in Ukraine had great importance and influence over happenings in Ukraine 2014, which they're a paramilitary organization, but they had their role. And what is important mentioning, the people who gathered in Kotor that day, who came from Bosnia, were convicted of being in Crimea in 2014, where people who are labeled as terrorists, but somehow came to Montenegro and joined Balkan Cossack Army in Kotor. Of course, Nightfalls, we know about them. There's no much need to talk about it. And of course, veterans from the 63rd Parachute Brigade in Montenegro, one of who we know really well is Mijailo Backovic. He is one of the founders, and also he is the priest of the Serbian Orthodox Church. He was in charge of protests in Budva. He was organizing protests in Budva last year, when it comes to Litija. And there's a lot of videos and photos of him coordinating people in that regard. Also, what is really important to mention, that he received a decoration from the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation by Major General Alexander Saluyanov. And now we come to part that's called Synergy between ROC and SOC, or Russian Orthodox Church and Serbian Orthodox Church. So referring to the strong, let's say, strong historical relations and fraternity of Orthodox people, the ROC dedicates a lot of attention to the region, but also dedicates a lot of attention to strengthening the relations between them and Serbian Orthodox Church. Therefore, the jurisdiction of the Serbian Orthodox Church in the Western Balkans is important from the aspect of spreading geopolitical interest of Russia in the region. Since 2016, actually, up to until now, there have been coordinated, let's say, movements and coordinated aggressive statements coming from the ROC, which was then followed by the same statements, just translated in our language, by the SOC. It was that during October, it was that during 2017 when we joined NATO, it was that on every single occasion when we have an important geopolitical event in our country. And of course, I'll just skip through this slide. I hope this works. Yeah, this one, when we had a priest of the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, who our church presented as the priest from Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the autocephalous Ukrainian Church, which was of course not true. He came here to give support to ongoing Litias in Podgorica. It was February, I think. But what is very interesting is that the Ukrainian embassy actually reacted on that occasion and showed that the guy who came was not member of the autocephalous Ukrainian Church, but a member of the Russian Church in Ukraine. To conclude this, I think the influence of the ROC and SOC also carries a risk not to Montenegro, not to region, but it carries a risk to European security. The SOC is used as a tool to destabilize and participate in political life of Montenegro, which is the part of tactics that enable Kremlin to carry out its goals, just the way it did in Ukraine in 2014. We also discussed this a little bit, but this is a nice overview of how people in the church chose the people in the government, the ministers, and the high-level people, the other high-level people. All of them, are connected. Most of the ministers are actually directly or either indirectly connected to the Serbian Orthodox Church, which just shows how much of importance of actually influence they have. In fact, from the very beginning, it was clear that the majority was, selected under the umbrella of influence of Serbian Orthodox Church. And I think the situation right now in our country opens the doors to Serbian world and calls into question the multi-ethnic, civic, and secular character of Montenegro. And this is what we also have to worry about. Of course, we cannot talk about Russian influence without Russian media, and both Russian media and pro-Russian media in the country. So in the arsenal of Russian tools for implementing political and other goals in the world, not just Montenegro, but Montenegro now in this case, information warfare has been high on the scale, adapted to the geopolitical events of the 21st century. Information warfare is permanent, and tools used include social media manipulation, using intelligence agencies, using political factors and organizations. But we'll see the best. I'll have the best for the end, so you can all see what happened in 2016 in Montenegro. So Russia media propaganda strongly affects our region due to the things I already said. We are quite, divided as a country, and Russia does not need to create any divisions. We have plenty of them, and this is what I like the most about the ambassador's opening speech. We need to work together. We have to be aware of these divisions. As long as we are not aware of the divisions, this information will work, and our country will be affected by it. And Russia knows it, and every other malign actor in our country knows it. As long as we stand united over things, this information has nothing to do here. So what did they write mostly about? What did occupy their attention? It's of course 2016-17. A law of the adoption of the freedom of religion was a significant topic in Russian media space. 2019, especially during 2020, of course, local elections in Nikšić and local elections in August 2020. Serbian tabloids, we've seen it, we know it. We don't need to spend any words on them. It's just Marko talked about it, how what they do in Montenegro, what are the main narratives, but this is just some main collage of pictures, what they write and what they are doing towards our country. So basically, now I want to show these are some of the main Russian and pro-Russian media in Serbia we identified. I won't go into every one of them, but I want to mention this one, which comes, of course, after it, which is Newsfront. Newsfront is a Russian FSB-controlled media, intelligence agency media of the FSB in Russia, which is really important for us. We stumble upon it, that the journalist that you see on the left in a blue shirt, Oksana Sazonova, who was in Crimea in 2014 and reported on Crimea, after that went to Serbia and tried to enter Kosovo after she was forbidden to enter Kosovo. Then a lot of TV shows for a month just interviewed her, how is that possible, that Kosovo doesn't allow Russians to enter there. It was a big deal in Serbia, but why is this important here is because after Serbia she went to Montenegro. And she was guest on Srpska TV with Ljubica Gojković-Vukićević, who you can see on the right, and she is a former spokeswoman for the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports headed by Vesna Bratić. So before we had in this very ministry Dragan Koprivica, who was the head of the Russian Center in the Philology faculty in Nikšić, and now we have her spokeswoman having connections with FSB outlets and their journalists. So the connections go that deep. Of course, even though none of the leading Russian media like Sputnik, like RT, are registered in Montenegro, this does not diminish the significance and effectiveness of the Russian propaganda in the region. When it comes to Montenegro, Russian propaganda is spread through domestic media, through media in Serbia, and of course, Russian regional media. So basically in 2017, we have proliferation of new pro-Russian media, Ujedinjenje, Nova Riječ, New Word, The Principle, or Sedmica. Only Ujedinjenje now works, which is renamed to Srpsko Ujedinjenje, or the Serbian unity, or union, and you can see the key characteristics behind me. But, I mean, the most significant role in promoting pro-Serbian and pro-Russian influence and values and stances in Montenegro belongs to the InfoRes news portal. According to the data we have, it was founded in 2009 by Gojko Rejčević and Vladimir Božović, the current rector of Montenegro, of University of Montenegro, whom speech you had the opportunity to listen at the first slide of my presentation. It is important that in 2020, in June, I think, they opened an editorial office in Belgrade. They opened a studio from which they broadcast on a national TV, so-called national TV. They broadcast to Serbia and to Montenegro. Even the US State Department report from the last year named disinformation pillars of Russian propaganda ecosystem, names InfoRes as the key partner of Russian media in Western Balkans. The other one, besides InfoRes, is Portal Borba, even though the intensity of the activities is not as high as InfoRes. Dražan Živković, who is behind Portal Borba, uses it for advocate better relations between Serbia, between Montenegro, between Russia. And since the change of the government in 2020 in Montenegro, there was a change in the management and management of certain TVs and media in the country. And now Dražan Živković, who leads Portal Borba, is now the editor and, let's say, the main guy at Prva TV in Montenegro, which you can see by the content they publish since the elections in here. Why is this important here? This is like the ecosystem of Russian propaganda, and the thing is that if you go into every single one of these media, you can find sources or quotes from InfoRes, for Borba, or some other Serbian media. And I guarantee you, you won't find any nice words for Montenegro or our Western path we took some time ago. So this is something to bear in mind. And the last part I left for Russian intelligence services. So the intelligence system in Russia mostly is inherited from the former state system, and it was burdened a long time from the complex organization forms. It managed to consolidate and grew into one of the main factors of Russian influence together with the church and together with the media. We have the GRU, or the main intelligence directorate, we have the SVR, or the Foreign Intelligence Service, and we have the FSB, or Federal Security Service. I won't go too much into the organization, it doesn't matter for this presentation, but what does matter is that Russia did not hesitate to use intelligence agencies as an important foreign policy tool, as a hybrid tool for hybrid operations, and including Montenegro. So let's jump to this slide. The doctrine of the, let's say, contemporary Russian activities attributed to Valery Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia. In 2013, he said something that was maybe not, So popular in the West, it maybe went under the radar, but once you have Google and access to information, you can find some things. And he said that, well, actually, that Russia should deal more with hacking rather than an open frontal attack. By hacking, he meant, later on he explained, the use of hackers, media instrumentalization, fake news creation, information leak, the presence of the businessmen, Russian businessmen in certain countries that facilitate these information operations. So why did I mention here the cyberspace? Because Russia was quite active in Montenegro in cyberspace area, and we'll discuss it. Over here you have these services like GRU, FSB, and SVR, and their attributed hacking groups. The first at the top, APT28, is the most important in our case, and I'll explain why. And the Russian concept of information operation is, and the role in cyberspace is exposed in several documents, like the National Security Strategy, Foreign Policy Concept, Doctrine of Information Security, and Military Doctrine of the Russian Federation. And the cyberspace aspect has big role in it. So alongside with Northern Macedonia, Montenegro was and is still the most significant target of cyber attacks and espionage with a Russian signature. These activities became particularly prominent during 2016 and 2017, and I'll show you the data later on. In the period of NATO accession, which coincided with the parliamentary elections in Montenegro, Russia became not just present, but really Russia intensified its presence in the media through disinformation, which we know, but something that is less known through the hacking group called APT28. On the parliamentary election in October, Montenegro faced frequent DDoS attacks, or denial of service attacks, that targeted the sites of public institutions, pro-NATO, pro-EU parties' web pages, pages of civil society, and pages of the election observers in October. Due to these efforts, the sites of news portals and some parties were taken down, and I think the site of the CDT, or the Center for Democratic Transition, which was who monitored the election at the time, could not have been accessed. And Ministry of Defense also at that time had some issues with it. More intensive DDoS attacks, just occurred and followed in January, February, and June of 2017, disrupting the web services of the government, again, media and state institution. Even Montenegro Ministry of Defense also reported at the time that they were target of phishing attacks through emails that seemed to have come from the EU or NATO with attachments that should not be opened, and fortunately for us, the ministry did not open it. It's after a while, we have found out it was actually a virus called Gamefish, which APT regularly uses in some other institutions, like in Germany, instances in Ukraine, and France as well. So it's a virus that offers a hacker good access to a computer, to exfiltration of data, files, logs, and other surveillance options. 3 cybersecurity companies, not from Montenegro, but from well-known and established in the world, FireEye, Trend Micro, and Asset, concluded in their reports, which you can find online wherever you want, that APT stands behind the attacks in Montenegro in 2016, in 2017. And a lot of US intelligence data point the connection between the GRU and the APT, if that was not obvious before. So we contacted the Computer Incident Response Team and asked them to provide us with the latest data on cyber attacks in Montenegro. So what is here very important is the first column, or attacks on websites and information systems, which have doubled, tripled since 2016 up to this moment. And then you have the same thing, which is malware attacks, which is the column you can see on the right. The numbers have, not doubled, but went even more than that after 2016. Of course, this cannot all be attributed to Russia, but it's very indicative in that regard that our NATO integrations and the Western path we took coincided with all of this increase in cyber attacks in Montenegro. And now, we have came across to data that was sent to Facebook, actually that was sent from Facebook to the US Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in 2019. US Senate the US Committee of Intelligence actually dealt with GRU operations in the US. And what was shown in this actually regard in that data of 33 pages that Facebook sent to Committee of Intelligence is that GRU from 2014 to 2019 created think tanks, alternative media, fake accounts, created in many countries, including Montenegro. And one of the most active, actually the second top active page on Facebook that dealt with Montenegro was coming from this set that Facebook gave to the US Committee of Intelligence. The operations that Russia conducted in Montenegro in 2016, from this data you will see, points on creating media websites, and you'll laugh when you see the media website they created, bot accounts, and distribution by bot accounts of the content produced by this fake media. So, I don't know if you can see it quite good, no, but the first one was about Syria. It promoted the Syrian, official Russia stance on Syria. The second most active page was Crna Gora News Agency. So Crna Gora News Agency was created by GRU in 2016 to promote, their ideas, and it was presented as a national information agency of Montenegro. Of course, it never existed, but it was the second most active with almost 1,500 posts. And out of 33 pages, this one was the second most active. It posted from a website called Crna Gora News Agency, or cgna.info or cgna.me. The articles usually aimed at discrediting West, at discrediting NATO, and it just represented another step forward in Russian aggressive media campaign and modus operandi in Montenegro. So this is the website they created. It's a screenshot of the website. Of course, it's taken down, but you can find it. And what stands out is that what we know from talking to our colleagues, friends from all over the world, whenever Russia does something like this, it's never on perfect English or the perfect local language. And whatever you read here, like primjer između vlade Sirije i SSA pomaže da prevazići humanitarna katastrofa, which is wrong on many levels when it comes to grammatics and language, Montenegro language. So it's quite clear here that no one from Montenegro actually handled this website. It was created by GRU as data from Facebook show. And the other thing is, they didn't just create this website and articles. Then they used this website as a relevant source in Russian media. So you have this Eurasia Daily Russian media that quoted CGNA as a relevant source, and this was this information right there within this text. They called for that the NATO agreed that in Montenegro the elections were hacked, stolen, whatever you want to call it. It's this fake news just there. So it's not only that Russian media use this, pro-Russian media in Bulgaria, we found it. Pro-Russian media in Ukraine also did it, using CGNA as a relevant source. So what else is here? It's this. So they created a lot of fake accounts, photos stolen, usually from VK. None of these person, including Jelena Rakočević, never existed. It's just the name. She's like a senior columnist for the Eastern Orthodox Affairs. And like many of them only published one photo and published articles only on one topic on poor English. Usually they wrote in English, it was really poor. Also, what is really important for this Jelena Rakočević, I had no idea that the forum cg.ru existed, but it's like a forum where Russian citizens talk about Montenegro. This girl or person, whoever was behind the account, she was very active there up until October 18th. Just after the coup in Montenegro, she stopped writing, and I never seen another post from her on this mentioned forum. Also, another persona, fake person that never existed, is Milko Pejović. This is a Medium portal. Like Medium is one kind of a social media. He studied at Faculty of Political Science, but that's also not true. He was like the biggest fan of Marko Milačić at the time, and later on his profile was deleted. But what he did is shared platform of votemontenegro.eu created by Marko Milačić, where citizens were able to cast votes online using their Facebook profiles for Montenegro not to join NATO. So they collected a lot of votes, but it never came only from Montenegro. Who knows who had the link to vote here? So the thing is, after he published it here, the FSB Newsfront Media, which I talked about before, also published this call for referendum, presenting Marko Milačić as a courageous and brave guy whom voters can trust. Some of the others accounts from Facebook dataset, they went to Twitter as well. All of them shared anti-NATO with hashtags Stop NATO, no to NATO, we want NATO and stuff like this. So this is quite active in 2016, and this is quite the proof that Russia was here in 2016 doing things you see here. And who knows what else that we didn't, we didn't follow. So yeah, Russian media, of course, the FSB, GRU, and SVR media, which is main ones are Inforos, Strategic Culture Foundation. The Strategic Culture Foundation is media and organization. And now that I'm seeing it, it's the organization that organized this roundtable that the rector of the Montenegro University talked at the very slide of my presentation. So they organized it. It's SVR, controlled media. You have South Front, you have News Front. Pro-Russian news portal Infores in our country was also listed as part of partners at South Front website during October, November, and December of 2018, after which it was deleted from partner organizations, but still you can find every single one of the Infores media reportage and coverage on the News Front and South Front portal and their media. So this is like also where I would like to stop now, and I know I took a long time for this, but I hope it was well worth it. If you have any suggestions, comments, questions, please feel free to ask me, Marco, whoever, and once again, thank you for listening and thank you for your attention. So, any questions here? Of course, you can find the whole publication. I mean, my colleagues gave it to you, but also we'll send it right after the conference on online PDF form, so you can read it more thoroughly. You can find things you would like to find. And if you don't have any questions now, if you stumble upon any of them later today or any day, please feel free to reach us, and we're quite open about answering all of them. Yeah. Hvala. Well, maybe if we go outside and eat something, maybe the questions will come right after that. So I would like everyone to go out and, yeah.
So since there are no questions anymore, I would like to thank you all for coming today, for joining us, and first of all to thank Milan and Marco, but most of all to the whole team who was behind this study, who worked hardly in the past 6 months or in the past 3 years, I would say, to have results as this, I know, guys, it wasn't easy. I know you had some really tough time, but your devotion to the idea, your devotion and your belief in the right cause is something, what makes the results even bigger. Thank you all for coming, and now please join us for some brunch outside this beautiful weather. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.